Hello, this is Noreen Crone-Findlay from TottyTalksCrafts.com and Crone-Findlay.com. This is the how-to for weaving the basic body, or all the bodies actually. I mean, it doesn't matter how you embellish or change your bear, but these are the instructions for weaving the body and legs. Now, the body and legs of the Saffron bear are woven from the neck edge up to the hip line in one piece and then divided, and the legs are then woven on half of the warp strands for each of the legs. So the loom is set up with the lower edge of the loom, of the combs, the sasha combs, 6 inches from the upper edge. 20 sets of warp strands are used for the body, and the body is warped with 2 sets of two threads, 2 pieces of yarn. Brain sort of wandering off in the next direction before I can get this one done, so please excuse me for that. Okay, so 20 sets of warp strands, and you do that by beginning with a slip knot. I'm going to pull up the slip knot, and I'm going to put it at the second peg from the right hand side, and I'm just easing up the slip knot so it'll go onto the upper peg. Now, so I go from one lower peg to the same upper peg, then I move to the next slot holding the 2 strands. See, I'm coming from the inside of the ball and the outside of the ball at the same time. This is hand spun yarn that my daughter-in-law spun for me in memory of our dear little dog who passed a few months ago. Now, I am just moving across the loom from the right to the left and working with having 2 strands of yarn held together, and each of those strands of yarn, I am, even though there are 2 strands of yarn held together, I'm calling them one warp strand because they are woven as if those 2 strands were a single strand. So up and down across the loom to the top, back down to the lower edge. Now, normally I weave using the sandy stand, so I weave with the loom held in the vertical position, but because it's just so much easier to film with the loom flat on the table, that's why I'm not using the stand right now, but I really highly recommend it. So I'm going to count now. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20 strands of warp. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut off the yarn at there we go, from the outside of the ball, and I want to lock it to the lower edge of the loom. So I'll just wrap it around, and then I'll take it just back and forth over a couple more of the pegs just to lock that in, and it won't interfere with my weaving at all. The next thing I want to do is to take a shed stick and weave that in across the upper edge. A shed stick can be like, this is a little dowel that I just put in the pencil sharpener and sharpened. It can be a double pointed knitting needle, or just looking to see if I can find a cocktail. I use those bamboo cocktail thingies. They're quite good, or a bamboo skewer. They work well. I also do things like I've carved myself some wooden weaving needles, and those are very nice too. So what you want though is just to weave under, over, across, and the reason for that is because you're going to be able then to just slide your weaving hook in, or if you're going to do this using a weaving needle, then your every other row you just scoot in that open shed that you've created with the shed stick, and that's pretty tickety-boo. That is great. Now, in my book, Innovative Weaving on the Frame Loom, even though I used different looms than what I'm using with the Saffron loom, the techniques in Innovative Weaving on the Frame Loom do transfer across to other frame looms, no matter what size or configuration. And the technique that I'm using is in this book, and it is a chained edge. Oh boy, I have a table beside there, and I had a tray of stuff sitting there, and oh my word, it just suddenly decided that the law of gravity was the law, and that was that. So anyhow, the chained edge technique works just great for this technique. So I'm going to use a crochet hook as a weaving needle. Just turning to look and see. I do have one right here. I also, maybe what I'll do is I'll use, this is a weaving hook that I carved from a chopstick. And they are actually my favorite weaving hooks. And I'll post the link on YouTube. All you need is like a nail file and a pencil and a sharp knife to carve these, and they just work beautifully. Okay, so to begin, I'm going to slide my weaving hook. Let's see, let's come down a bit closer. Scooch this up a bit. Okay, I'm going to slide my weaving hook into that open shed, and I'm now going to take and place, I've pulled the weft yarn out of the ball, and I am making a loop over my finger. And so I take that loop and I place it on the weaving hook. I now take it through the weaving, very gently easing it through, and I am going to see how you kind of come up in a bump. You don't come straight across and pull right in, because what will happen is you will hourglass your weaving. Sometimes you want to pull in and shape it. This is not the time you want to do that. So I'm going to use I've got a wooden fork here that I'm using as a beater, and I'm pretty happy with where that loop is, but I think I'll ease it in just a little closer and push it back down. And this loop that I folded onto the hook is going to stay on the hook. And now I'm going to go over the warp strands that I went under, and under the ones I went over, back across. And this is how I weave the second row. Now you can see I am getting a balanced weave because I have 2 warp strands, and by folding the weft strand in half, that gives me 2 weft strands. Let's lift this up. There, you can see. So it's going over 2, under 2. And now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull out a loop from my ball of yarn, place it on the hook, and I'm putting a bit of pressure on the loop so that it doesn't jump off of the hook. And then I let go and I turn my hook and I ease it through the loop that was on the hook. Now this loop is going to stay on the weaving hook, and I don't like that loop, so in order to get rid of that loop, I'm easing the one strand that was looping out there and making this loop on the hook too big, and I do want it to be quite close to the edge. And so I pulled on the weft strand and eased it back into place. And now I'm going to, again, just gently nudge it into place. And I'll just make sure that things aren't pulling in. And then I'm going to repeat these 2 rows for 2 inches up to the hip line. So you can see pretty clearly, oh, I won't show you. Yes, you can see pretty clearly that you've got 1 inch of pink and 1 inch of white to give you 2 inches to the hip line. So I guess that's okay. I could show you a little better on, here's this bear. So you can see 2 inches to the hip line from shoulder or neck edge to hip. All right, so I'm going to just finish weaving with those 2 rows repeating for 2 inches. Oh, I am using what is it's a number 4 medium weight yarn. Medium weight yarns are great if you're using a thin yarn. This gorgeous yarn that my daughter-in-law carefully chose colors in memory of our little dog is a lighter weight than would work well for just using 2 strands held together. So it would, when I wove my test swatch, the fabric was really too open weave, and I wasn't happy with that. So I just plied a small ball with the 2 strands held together and plied them on my spindle. And so that gave me a thicker yarn that I'm happier with. So if your yarn is too thin, you can combine multiple strands or add other strands to it or ply it. It's just a nicer, denser fabric if you use, like in the tabby weaving, if you use a slightly thicker yarn. Now, when you're weaving your bear using the tapestry techniques, then you will, it's fine to use thinner yarns because tapestry is woven with the weft being pushed down and covering the warp strands. So this is super thin. This is like needlepoint yarn, very, quite a thin woolen yarn. So using the tapestry technique for thin yarns works great. Okay, so enough talking, back to weaving. So I will see you when I have woven up 2 inches. I've woven 2 inches from the neck edge to the hip edge. Now I'm going to take the weaving hook out of the loop at the right hand edge of the loom, and I am going to just put a safety pin there to hold that loop in place, because now I'm going to pull the shed stick out of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 of the the warp strands, And if you want to separate those out, you can use a safety pin or a carabiner, just to pull them out of the way while you're weaving the leg, the first leg, so that you're not going to accidentally weave in part of the second leg into the first leg. So what I'll do now is I'm going to continue in the same pattern, and I will weave the 2 rows, repeating them up the first leg, which is the 10 strands. Oops, and I've sort of got myself in the habit of going all the way across, so I have to pull that down, and I'll just tap that into place and scoot my hook up and into the shed and across and down, and then just enough to get me across. Pull that back. Am I happy with that? Yes, that'll do just fine. So I'm going to continue weaving the 2 strands of this first leg right up, and this is the toe edge, because as you can see with, there you go, the legs are they are continuous to the toe, even though if you want you can do the feet a different color, and the leg will be turned and stitched. So you are weaving from the hip to the tip of the toe. So that's what I'm going to do now. Just going to carry on weaving these 2 rows right up to the top of the loom, and then I will come right back. I've woven all the way up to the tip of the toes on the left hand side of the loom, and now I'm going to take a pin and I'm going to slide, I'm going to hold it up against the end of the hook, slide the weaving hook out and slide the pin on to hold that last loop securely in place. I've snipped the yarn from the ball. I'm just going to leave excuse me, this leg on the loom, and I'm going to take the carabiner off of the other leg, slip those ends out. There we go. So that leg is free now. And I'm going to weave the shed stick in again, under, over, across the remaining 10 strands of, well, okay, it's 10 sets of warp strands. So yeah, there's, I'm going under 2, but we're calling it under 1 because we're weaving it as if it's 1. Okay, and now I'm going to take the yarn from the center of the ball, and I'm going to leave a tail end for stitching up later, and I'm going to continue weaving the second leg. Now I'll slide the hook into the loop that's currently on this pin, and I will take that pin out, and the hook is now holding a loop that's ready to go, and I'm going to continue weaving my 2 rows by paying attention, reading my last row and saying, okay, that's what I need that's the path I need to take. So I've got, I don't have to tie a knot or anything. I'll just bring the loop through, push it into place, use the fork if I need to. And now the next row is using the shed stick. So I slide it up, pivot along the shed stick, and pivot, and then make sure that my cut ends go down out of the way, and I make a loop and use my finger to tension the loop, and then when I'm across I drop my finger out, I pull through, pull back, and that will bring the loop right up to the leg, and pack that, ease, not pack that into place. So now I will continue weaving up to the toes on the second leg. And I'll come back to you when I'm at the top of the loom. I'm at the top of the loom now, so I am going to snip a length of, sorry I did that off screen, people yell at me about that, they got really mad at me when I do that, sorry. Anyhow, so I've snipped a length of yarn. I probably should have made it longer, but anyhow. So I'm going to take it, I'll lift these off the edge, and I'm just going to flip this around so it's a bit easier for me to do. And I will come down a bit closer so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just taking it through the last set of loops at the top of the loom. These will be the toe. And this strand of yarn is now going to go through the loop that's on the hook. And when I am gathering the toe, I will simply pull it up like that, and then that will be used to sew the leg up. Now, sewing the leg up is in a different video, in the assembling the bears video. I do just want to remind you that this is a bear done in a balanced weave, tabby weave. But you can use tapestry weave instead of the balanced weave, and that can be a pretty nifty way of making fine and fancy bears. So this one is a bit easier to lift off because I'm not banging up against the edge here the way I was with the first one. So I'm reaching under, pulling through, and this was the end that I snipped when I finished this leg. And I'm going to reach in under, pull through, and reach. Actually, I can just lift them off and continue with the reaching in from the back to the front, and that will give me, oops, I would want it coming, okay. Basically what I'm doing is I'm keeping the weave structure the same, so I want the loop to actually come through so that it's bringing the loop that was at the back will move to the front by stitching like this. And now again I'll go into the loop that's on the pin. I think I've split my yarn there. Open that up a bit better. Okay, and now take the pin out. And I can pull up for the second toe. Oops, I need to go back up again so you can see that. So I have pulled up, so both legs are now pulled up. And So this strand of yarn will be used to reinforce the gap between the legs. Now I'm going to undo the strand of yarn that was at the bottom edge of the loom, and I'm going to do the same thing I did at the top. So I can lift this off the loom, and I have a loop where I have turned where I had to go around, and so it makes a bit of a long loop. So often what I'll do is I'll actually even twist it a couple of times just to take up the slack. And now I want to bring the back loop to the front, so I'm stitching through from the front over so that that puts a bit of tension on it. And this is how we're going to gather up the neck edge, using that yarn that was left at the beginning of the weaving. This is from the outside edge of the ball, and then when I finish stitching across, I will come up against here's the slip knot. So I go into the slip knot once, and then I go to the other side of the slip knot and twice. I pull my strand out, my needle out of the strand, and I pull up. There we go, and there's the neck edge gathered, and the body is ready to be assembled. And so you can go to the video about assembling the saffron bear, and that will show you how to do the assembly of the body. So this basic body, no matter how you choose to weave it, this is the foundation of how to weave the body for the saffron bears. My blog, tottytalkscrafts.com, has a post that lists all of the links showing all the complete how-to videos so that you'll be able to weave all of the saffron loom bears as well as the tiny little hello loom bears. And as well, there are other links for things like how to carve the weaving hook. The full link for that precise page is in the text under the original YouTube post. And if you just go to Totty Talks Crafts without that link, you can type into the search box whether you say teddy bears or Summer Weaving Challenge 2022, it will bring up that page so that you'll have access to all of the information on how to weave all these wonderful bears, these and so many more. So that's where you'll find all the information you need. Happy weaving and enjoy every moment.